Hi everyone. Today I want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about things that you might do if you've been given an essay assignment and you're not sure either how to start or how to think about organizing your response to the assignment. So what I'm going to cover today, of course, is not going to be exhaustive, but it should give you some things to consider and ways to move forward with anything that you're working on. First thing that probably is not going to be surprising to you, or that is not news to you, is that we need to remember that a paper has three main components. It has an introduction that provides the reader with an overview of what is going to be covered in the paper, gets them sort of centered and grounded in the topic that you're going to review. It has a body that goes into more details and specifics than the introduction ever possibly could, and a conclusion that wraps it up. Make sure to let the reader know what's important, how to take this idea forward, things to think about in the future. So that introduction, body, and conclusion are the main three parts that every essay should have. And there are options to begin getting there. So say that you have a essay assignment and you're not sure how you want to answer it, what to do, where to go. My suggestion to you would be to just start doing something. For a lot of us, that means that we just start writing on a blank screen. That is not my recommendation to you. I recommend that you spend a couple of minutes, anywhere from 10 to 15, brainstorming, outlining, getting some ideas down before you just start putting words onto the page. Just starting to free write in your actual essay like that can lead you to having a significant amount of revision time. So if you're not a big reviser, you don't love it or enjoy it, it might be a good idea to spend some time outlining, drawing. That can, if you're sort of more visual that way, that could be a great thing. Just draw a picture, draw something to get some ideas going. You might do some kind of word web. You might do some free writing, and there are some examples of those that will be included later on. So all of these things are ways that you could get started with working on an essay assignment. Once you have some ideas down, the first thing that you want to do is establish your thesis or your central claim for your paper. So this is the thing that that is your guiding principle, or the thing that you are trying to prove, or the thing that you are trying to argue, depending on the kind of paper that you're writing. And this statement is really important. It can be a couple of sentences, depending on the length of your paper, but your thesis statement, your central claim, should act as a direct response to the essay question. So one way to kind of test this is read the essay question to yourself and read your central claim right after it, and it should act almost as though it's an answer to that question. So that's something to focus on. If you want to learn more about central claims and thesis statements and how to make them, there is another video on that, so I'm not going to go into too much more detail on them here. Because what I do want to talk about with you guys today are ways to organize or structure your paper. Now again, I'm not going to be able to go over all the ways that you could structure your paper, but I will go over three main ones. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is called, if you're writing for an exploratory essay. So this is a kind of writing that you would do just to sort of begin looking into a question. And it has, again, those same main features. It's going to start with an introduction that establishes what you're going to talk about. So it gives an overview of the question that you're trying to answer. It shows why you're interested in it. It presents relevant background that the reader needs to know in order to get going on your paper. And you build up to sort of showing them what you're exploring, what you're trying to answer, what you're trying to get at. So that's an introduction. That can be 1 to several paragraphs, again, depending on the length of the paper overall. If it's like a 4 to 6 page paper, I would expect an introduction to stay around a 1 paragraph mark. If you're getting longer and longer than that, you can start expanding out if you need that time. Then you have the body section 1. We'll call it, and this is where you bring in a source and you start talking about what that source says and the information that you got from it. You summarize the content and that source's argument, and you offer your response to that argument that that source makes. So that could be that you support what the source says, you challenge what the source says, you support some of it and challenge other parts of it, but it's a discussion around what was found in this source and why you found it important, significant, relevant, and where you found it not so much. Then you move on to repeat this process with the next source. So you again summarize the argument, you give the main ideas of the source, and you look for points of agreement or disagreement with that first source. So this paper structure is actually asking you to organize your paper by presenting one source in each body paragraph and moving down through the paper that way. So you repeat this process over and over until you've moved through all the sources that you need to. Again, looking for those points of agreement and disagreement throughout. And then, of course, you end up with your conclusion. This is where you're going to wrap up your journey and explain what you're thinking and your new understanding of this topic and what you're discussing. You're going to present your current answer to the question that you offered in the introduction, and explain, or you could possibly explain why you can't answer it or why we need to know more or what you think might be missing from the intellectual discussion. But this kind of essay, an exploratory essay, is all designed on what you're trying, a question that you're asking and the answer that you're trying to discover from it. The second kind of way to structure your paper is a much more classical argument. So this is probably something that you're really familiar with, but we would start our introduction with something very general and we would move more specific. So I think of it as like a inverted, wait, let me see. Yeah, there we go, as an inverted triangle. So we start with something general, we move to something very specific, that most specific thing being our central claim or our answer to the essay question. So in that introduction, you are providing the reader with some background and things to think about regarding your issue. Then the main body of the paper is going to present reasons in turn, things that support your claim, evidence, examples, reasons, things that you want the reader to know in order to agree or see the logic in what you're saying. So you would move through all of those points. You would potentially summarize opposing views, anything that might disagree with you, and you would challenge that. Say, yes, I know you might think X, but my sort of idea or my thought is makes more sense because. So you acknowledge that there might be people who have different views than you, and that there might be some good arguments that are different than yours, but then you want to sort of challenge those in some way. So you might concede strengths to other viewpoints, but still sort of hold your ground in what you're saying from your viewpoint. And then, of course, end with a conclusion. So we've got the exploratory essay, way to organize a paper. We've got the classical argument, and we also have a delayed thesis. So this is a little bit less common, especially in American writing and especially for newer writers. So if you feel like you have a sort of good hold on those other two ways, this might be something else to consider. But if those other two sound really difficult and new to you, you might want to stay away from the delayed thesis. It is what it sounds. You don't actually get to your thesis until the end of the paper. So unlike the example I just gave of the classical argument, where the thesis is presented at the end of the introduction, this is you're delaying the delivery of your thesis. You start your paper with your introduction where you establish the problem and engage the audience in that problem. Give them a reason to care and to consider what you're saying. Then you have a dialogic discussion. And what I mean by this is that you show the problem from multiple viewpoints. So you bring in your sources, you show all these different views and the validity of them and the problems with them, and you invite the audience to sort of say or think where they stand on the issue. And you show how you're wrestling with the problem after knowing all of these different viewpoints. Then you present your thesis or your central claim toward the end of your paper, toward the end of the argument. And you support it with several reasons, some of which you pull from the body that you just provided, and you might build on a couple of points. Then you would end with a conclusion, giving the audience something to think about and to think about your position as it developed from all of the information that you had. So those are three ways that you can think about writing or organizing a paper. But to decide which one to go with, there are some things that you should think about, and there's two main things that I want to point out to you. One thing that you want to consider is, who are you writing to? So who is your audience, and how do you need to appeal to them to get them on board with what you're saying or what you're presenting? Do you need to build your ethos? Do you need to provide logos? Do you need to talk about pathos and pull them in through emotion? What are the things that you need to do in order to get your readers to hear what you're saying? And the last thing to consider is, what's your purpose? This can often be found on your assignment sheet. But what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to write an argumentative essay? Are you trying to write an informative essay? The aim that you're trying to reach will really help you determine how you should organize and structure your paper.